One of the big issues about talking about skills in the 21st century, learning skills, skills for work, is it raises a lot of issues which we haven't yet tackled. I mean, one of the issues is something that David Warlick said. He said, how can we prepare children for a world of work that we can't clearly describe yet? And I think the rapid process of change, you know, the rapid emergence of new technologies, economic turmoil, all of these things create a kind of a future of uncertainty. And I think one of the problems is that teachers are now in a very invidious position of trying to prepare children for a world of work that doesn't yet exist. So my view on this is that what we should be doing is we should be preparing them for a whole host of learning new literacies, new host of literacies. I don't mean just skills, because skills are how you do things, but I think literacies go beyond that. Literacies are where you are immersed in the culture and you understand it completely and you're able to shape your behavior and your productivity around that culture. So for me, one of the most important sets of skills that a young person needs to know in the 21st century is digital literacies. That includes things like, you know, how to present yourself, how to negotiate meaning with people in an online situation, a collaborative environment. Things like transliteracy, the ability to present yourself equally well across many platforms. So for me, I think those are vital. Obviously, we need to instill within students the ability to learn and the ability to think, the ability to reflect on practice, the ability to be critical, so that if they go onto the internet, they don't swallow everything whole. A lot of my students still like to quote from Wikipedia, and I have to say to them, look, okay, Wikipedia is fine, it's getting better, but there are still inaccuracies, there are still issues with that where people are coming in and vandalizing it and putting up erroneous content. If you believe that and you cite it in your assignment, you're going to have a problem. So I think all of these kind of issues around literacies are going to be vitally important. And I think I'll stop at that point and pass over to you.
I agree with what you were saying. I particularly like your insight into the idea of transliteracies. One of the things that I've been describing to people is the idea of the human iPhone. You know, that we download certain apps on our iPhone when they interest us, when they're of value to us, when they're a tool we want to use. So, for example, on travelling out to Saudi recently, I was travelling out on British Airways and British Airways had an app. So I downloaded the British Airways app because it would give me my flight times, I could check in online, etc., etc. But when I get home, my next flight's with an American airline, so I'm going to get rid of the British Airways app and download an American airline app. And I think that idea of being able to, first of all, understand and select competencies and skills for the environment and time and situation you're in, and then being able to be aware enough to say, well, those aren't necessarily the competencies and skills I need in this situation, so I'm going to switch them over, becomes extremely important. I think this whole idea of preparing our children to live in a world of uncertainty is absolutely at the core of the future education model, but is so completely removed from the model that was created at the advent of mass education. You know, we were preparing the majority of the population for mass employment, for sifting and sorting people so that we knew which jobs they had the best aptitudes for, because the jobs were there, the companies were there, the lifestyles were there, etc., etc. But we are living in the age of the individual, and particularly the people who aren't just going to be able to survive but thrive in the future are people that are going to be able to adapt and change. They're going to have to be incredibly aware of who they are. They're going to have to be incredibly aware of what their strengths and their weaknesses are, what they're good at, what they're bad at, and how they can deploy those different elements of their lives in different ways. And I think, you know, if I had a wish for the future generations, they weren't like us, because I think that what we've been taught to be is reactive. And I think of all things, my dream for our children and for their children is that they become proactive generations, that they don't wait for circumstance before they take action, that they're actually hypothesizing and taking action first, you know, and that they're able to take risks, that they're able to take knockbacks, that they're able to make mistakes, and they have the skills and abilities to process those mistakes constructively and positively and apply that new learning in new ways. And of course, having said all of that, that implies that we're going to have a huge challenge on our hands for teachers, for our current generation of teachers and for our future generations of teachers. Because again, we've got to be looking far more at the beauty of the hypothesis, of the potential of what could be, rather than locking down what is. And the traditional model for a teacher is as the font of the knowledge, the giver of wisdom, the giver of information. And that simply can't be the role of the teacher now or in the future. And if you take new technology, for example, one of the greatest blockers to the real adaptation of modern technologies in a classroom is the fear of the teacher and their lack of knowledge and understanding. And what we really need teachers to do with new technologies is allow technology into the classroom and for the students to teach the teacher how to use it. So in so many ways, I think the future is about collaboration, interaction, and the ability to know yourself and how to project yourself differently in different situations.
I like what you say about the age of the individual. I think we are definitely living in the age of the individual. Things have changed radically over the last, I suppose, decade or two. And it's not just because of technology, it's because of a whole range of globalization processes. Going back to the idea of the school being a place where we trained people for an industrial process or a world of work which was industrialized, it's very interesting that we did actually do what Ken Robinson says. We batch process children by age and we silo all of the content. And we need to go back to where we were before that, I think, in many ways, back to an agricultural age where it was a just for me type of curriculum. The just in case curriculum was great for that time period, and the synchronization of behavior trained people to arrive at the factory gates. It's interesting, when the bell rang at 1 o'clock in school, you had to be hungry. You know, it was everything was synchronized. But now I think we now have to start thinking about how school needs to change to meet the needs of this current society. And one of the things that is important is that we look at personalized technologies and how they can help us to personalize learning. We talk about personalized learning environments, or PLEs, the idea that every child has a handheld device or some kind of device with them whereby they can access personal content. They can talk to each other in personal ways. They can individualize what they're learning and therefore pursue what they're interested in. And I think that's got to be a key for all teachers and for all schools to adopt and adapt to in the next 10, 20 years.